Thank you for joining me. Quite overwhelmed with how many people have been watching these videos. I appreciate the comments. Always enjoy reading what people write and their experiences. I thought I would talk tonight a little bit about what I've tried as far as a session zero. Session zero, very useful, sets the parameters. In the past, I've used a session zero to talk about the type of game we're going to play, what the setting is like, what's in the setting, what's not in the setting, what races are available for players to play if that's a thing, what classes are available, if there's any restrictions on that. We've experimented with all sorts of things, and we usually handle that in a session zero. What I did differently this last time, this was our last session zero, which was I would say about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, is we started off just talking about movies that the players like, that we all enjoy, and we just brainstormed, movies, TV shows that stuck with us, and we talked about that for a while, and until we could. It appeared as though there was a bit of a consensus as to which type of movie we would like to have as a setting for our new game. And then we combined kind of a couple favorite movies to see, well, what if we were to combine Stargate, which was a favorite for some of the players. I'm not as well versed with that one, but with something like True Detectives. Could we combine those two into a new setting? And we talked about that for a while and got excited about it and play, well, what is it? What's in the setting? Or what does the world look like? And then after settling in on that, which was a new experience, I haven't really done that before, where we brainstormed the setting together. In the past, what I would do is I would sit down and using tools, which are good tools, there's nothing wrong with them per se, but I would create the setting and then I would just explain to my players, well, here's your setting. And involving the players in the creation of the setting, I think, was valuable because maybe that's going to help them buy into the setting, or be able to contribute more to the scenes when we actually start playing. So that was my experience. I didn't come up with it, of course. There's not many things that I do come up with on my own. I borrowed that from some other YouTubers. I think again, I give credit to Shauner. He had mentioned, what's your favorite movie, and then just building a setting off that. And we took that, and then he may have mentioned this or not, but the idea that I had was, well, let's combine two, and maybe even two different genres, and see if we can come up with something that will feel new but is still familiar enough that we know what type of characters we could conceivably create in the setting. And then to finish it off, we created the characters together, which was a good experience. I think that's always a good idea in a session zero to start off that way. The next thing I want to try with the session zero is something that Black Lodge Games talked about, and others too. I think it sounds great. It's just logistically it's hard to do this in an in-person game, which is to have a bit of a prelude session with me and one player, or me and two players, where we just role play the character's backstory, I guess, like just to get them up to the point of where so they get a little comfortable or familiar with the character and the setting. So I'm going to try that. I hope to try that. A bit of a one-on-one prelude of, okay, well, let's explore together this role playing on this particular character that you've created before we introduce the other players and their characters. So I'll report back on that. I thought that was an intriguing idea, and I think that could be fun. So we'll see. So yesterday was our weekly game, and as I did last time when I recorded a video, I wanted to talk about our ongoing efforts to really enhance the immersion of the game. So what I did yesterday is before we actually started the game session, I asked all of the players if they had any out of character questions that I could answer before we start. So when we sat down, it was time to get going. I just said, "Well, do you have any out of character questions that you're unsure of from our last game session last week?" And there were a few. There were a couple of questions about mechanics in the game, what a certain class ability means, like how that would work. I think there was a one or two questions about what had happened last week, or I think there was one kind of setting question. But it was nice to get those out of the way before we began. And when we began, this is the other thing I tried. After having a good conversation after our game from a week ago with two of the players talking about having a cinematic experience. Like, we're gaming for 2.5, 3 hours. There's no reason why we couldn't have a fantastic movie that's emerged from the play, and to think cinematically as we're playing and describing the characters' actions, what they're doing. So I said that to everybody before we began. I made a few notes for myself. I'm not trying to script this, obviously. If I am, that's pretty sad. But that emphasis on the cinematic experience, I just said, try to think of that favorite movie, or put yourself. I have the Western music playing in the background, and that helps set the mood. And then I invite all the players to focus in on their character. And we had one player that really just didn't connect with his character last time, and he was having a hard time being immersed in the game with that particular character, and so he changed it out. And I think that's fine. I think that's a good thing to do. If you have a player, I'm not going to give advice. Who am I to give advice? But I've found personally that it's not a good idea, or I haven't had any success, I guess is a better way of putting it, insisting that a player stay with a character that they hate. If they really despise playing the character, rather than running the character off a cliff, you just sunset that character off screen, and then we introduce a new one. It worked fine. It was relatively seamless, and I'm encouraged because I think this is our youngest player, and youngest in the hobby as well. So I wouldn't want to insist that someone so new to the hobby is stuck playing a character they absolutely loathe. That sounds like a disaster. They're just gonna be turned off the hobby entirely, potentially. What else did I want to say about that? So those things worked well. Those were kind of the highlights. I have to hand it to my players. They really are making an honest effort to be more immersed, to not ask out of character questions. And I've noticed a dramatic improvement in that regard. I had a question. One of you commented. I don't have it open in front of me. I can't recall the name of the commenter, but he asked about a comment I had made where I said I don't answer out of character questions. So we had one or two of those last night, not very many. What happened was one of the players just asked me, so can I see this? Like, or can I see what this is like? Something, a question like that. So it was a location type question, and I'm not trying to be patronizing or to the players, but I just kind of I put it back in his court. I said, "Do you see that?" Because I told them, I guess this is the other thing I should share with you. Before we started, I told all my players, I said, I trust you to not insert things into scenes that really shouldn't be there, that break the fancy word time, the verisimilitude of the world. So I gave an example. I said, you know that most of the time when you ask me if you can find this or you can find that, most of the time I say yes anyway. So if it's, and I think most game masters, dungeon masters, referees, judges, I think most are of that mindset. That's not to say I never roll to see, but I don't want to answer questions of that are out of character to me, just as if they're asking someone that they don't see that's in the scene. I hope that makes sense. And my response to that is just not to answer it. I just ask them, well, you tell me, what do you see? And then it's kind of uncomfortable for a little bit because, well, what do you mean? I tell you. But I did tell when we were talking about thinking cinematically, as far as actions and what the characters are doing, and we're creating these scenes together. Not sure where they're going to go. It'll emerge as we role play our various characters, and I role play mine, they role play theirs. I encouraged them to help create a rich scene and then I suggested, well, if you're creating a scene and all of a sudden I open the closet and lo and behold, there's my belt-fed Gatling gun ready to repel all of the bandits that are coming towards us, and I'll just wheel that out because thankfully the person that put it into the closet knew I was going to need it at some point, and so they just left it there. So, well, I reserve the right to say no if it's a stretch too far. But an example of what happened in the game last night, which was a character taking that initiative or taking the license that I've encouraged them to take, was when this youngest player we have described how he's going to, he wanted to climb up on the awning of a building. And this is a small picture, a Wild West frontier type town where they've got boardwalks that are covered by awnings in front of all the buildings. And I did show some pictures. I had printed off some pictures, generated some artwork that was designed to help visualize the town they were at, the location, the world. But I didn't specifically say, yeah, there's an awning and it overhangs this, and then that's where the jail is. And he just said, well, I'm going up here and I'm climbing up onto the awning and and he said, well, there's an awning, and everyone kind of understood. Yes, that's where he is. And it made sense. Everyone can picture it in their head. So that worked really well. Okay, so areas for continued improvement. The players are doing fantastic, as I mentioned just a minute ago. They're doing great. They're really trying hard to stay in character the whole time. And I think they're doing admirably. They're really good at it, or getting better at it, I should say. And we all are, as we are all trying to do it. An area that is turned out to be surprisingly difficult is talking to one another in character. So my players, don't seem to have much trouble right now, or it's becoming much easier for them to stay in character whenever they're addressing me or the characters that I have in the game. But they're still a little awkward when it comes to talking to one another in character. It's getting better, but an example of this would be one of the characters says, I'm going to go over to that character over there, and I'm going to ask for one of these cursed candles that we found. And I just, well, I'm glad you're telling me where you are and what you're doing, but really you should just be talking to that character who has the cursed candles. You could just walk over there and talk to them. And there was some what's a good term for that? Inter-party role play within the character between the players where I'm not really involved. But I think that's an area where we're going to need some more work on that. And I'd be interested, maybe you found that too. It's, staying in character with the game master is one thing, but how is it staying in character with other players? Is that easier for you? We're finding that a little harder, but we're getting better. We are getting better. This a little bit surprising for me. I'm used to, I was introduced to the hobby back in the D&D 3.5, 3.0 days. Lots and lots of dice rolling, lots of mechanics. Loved it. I thought that was great. Didn't really know any better. I called for fewer dice rolls last night, and not that I didn't call for any. I just called for fewer dice rolls. We role played out more things, And what I found was that calling for fewer dice rolls actually made those dice rolls more impactful. It was a less is more type thing, which I thought that was interesting because I've heard others say, other commentators, and I think they have a good point, is that, if you don't have any dice rolls, then what are you really doing? You're just hand waving everything. And I don't want to hand wave everything, but where there was an impactful potential, failure or success, having that die roll, then, everyone's on the seat of their pants, the edge of their seat, I should say, looking and to see, well, what is the result of this? So what's going to happen? So I thought that was good. That was something that, maybe you could try that in your games, like cutting back a little bit on the number of dice rolls, but makes the ones that you do have more of an event. Let's see. Just one other thing I'll just mention with this particular Wild West, Western Frontier, Weird Frontiers, is the game setting. We're doing it as episodic. So it's really just a series of one-shots. And again, I'm borrowing this from others that have suggested when they're talking about campaigns. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have a couple players that I don't think I'm going to have for a whole lot longer, because they'll be going off to school, or they're no hard feelings or nothing, like, not like I'm giving them the boot. It's just they're expected to go on and do other things. And I'm not exactly sure when that would be. So it made sense to me to have just one shot each week. We have one adventure, and then there's an underlying story that's building from those episodic. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. The other nice thing from my perspective of that is that I'm only preparing for the one session. That's it. And my preparation really is more of finding or creating some artwork that helps ground where it starts, and then thinking of some big problem to just get the ball rolling, and then coming up with some ideas in terms of motivations for a few of my characters. I see I'm already at 17 and a half minutes. I need to speed it up here. The last thing I want to talk about in this video diary is I was invited to play an online game with Abraham from Talking About Games, and another individual. I know him as Josh. He has a different YouTube handle. That was a really interesting experience. I had not been a player in a game for a long time. I've always been I've typically been the game master. It was really good practice for me to try to stay in character for a whole session, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was great practice. I think that, to his credit, Abraham is one, he does practice what he preaches. You can see that it's quite easy to create easy. Maybe not easy. Easy is not the right word, but it's one thing to create a list of 5 things or 10 things or 15 things that you must do. It's quite another to put that in your actual practice and then demonstrate that. And I saw that time and time again. He really was doing what he has said in several of his videos, which I appreciate. I think that's good. It's good. Someone that has integrity and cares about his craft and wants to get better. One area where I could do a lot better in that game, and having reflected a little bit on it, and this may have been nerves. I didn't match the tone very well. I was more inclined to be a little more comedic, and that probably is nerves. Just I hadn't done anything like that before, and here it's going to be up on YouTube, and literally tens of people will see it, and and I was a little nervous, and so I was a little more comedic in some of the actions that I was taking in the descriptions, and I think going forward, what he has envisioned for that adventure campaign is much more grimdark, much more somber, and Yeah, so I just need to learn to pick up on those cues a little better. Anyway, I thought I thought I would just share this. Hopefully, there's been something useful there that you can perhaps try out in your game, whether it's in the session 0, or whether it's giving a little bit of time before the game session to just clarify out of character things before you actually get going, thinking cinematically in your descriptions, trying more to be a role player with the other players at the table, not just the guy behind the screen. I don't use a DM screen, but you get the idea. And yeah, maybe cutting a little bit back on the number of dice rolls so that the dice rolls that you have are more impactful. And you may disagree with that, of course, but that's something that I found. So anyway, if you've made it this far, I thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for listening to me ramble on here about my experiences with the game. All right. Thank you. Till next time.